They smirked, pleased, certain I'd never amount to more than a footnote in their son's perfect life. I should have walked away when his mother slid that folder across the table, her crimson nails tapping the edge like it was a gift. But I didn't, because I was in love, because I believed Darren was different, that he wasn't like them. I was wrong. When I met Darren Monroe, I wasn't rich, but I was doing just fine. I had a stable career as a mechanical engineer, lived in a 2-bedroom apartment near Green Lake in Seattle, and took pride in being self-made. I didn't grow up with luxury, but I grew up with values: hard work, respect, and boundaries. Darren, on the other hand, came from a different world. His parents, Bruce and Eleanor Monroe, ran a private aviation firm that catered to ultra-wealthy clients. They wore wealth like a skin, polished, effortless, untouchable. Darren had never struggled a day in his life. His education at Stanford? Paid in full. His waterfront house in Mercer Island? A wedding gift from his parents. His job? A cushy executive role that he didn't earn but inherited. He was born into a castle, and I walked through the gates thinking maybe, just maybe, someone like me could belong. From the very beginning, it was obvious Bruce and Eleanor didn't approve of me. Eleanor would invite me to family dinners but spend the evening dissecting my background. Not my job, but where I came from. How my father ran a repair shop in Tacoma. How I had ambition but no connections. Bruce didn't even pretend. He'd glance at me, nod curtly, then go back to his scotch. Still, Darren made me feel seen. He said the right things. He laughed at their snide comments and whispered, "Don't mind them, they don't get to define us." I believed him. So when he proposed, I said yes, and I stupidly thought that would be the beginning of my family finally accepting me. Instead, it was the night they revealed their true colors. We were invited to the Monroe's estate for a celebration dinner. The house smelled like rosemary and wealth. Eleanor wore a diamond bracelet the size of my wrist, and Bruce poured wine like it was water. But the tone shifted when dessert was cleared. Eleanor set down her glass of wine, smiled tightly, and said, "Before we move forward, there's a small matter we need to handle." Bruce pulled out a manila folder and slid it across the table. I stared at it. "What's this?" "A prenup," Eleanor said breezily. "Nothing to worry about, just a formality. It ensures that in the event of a divorce, Darren's assets remain protected." I looked at Darren, waiting, hoping he'd speak up. He didn't. He looked down at his plate like it might save him. Bruce cleared his throat. "This is Darren's house, his accounts, his inheritance. If something ever goes wrong, you leave with what you came in with." What I came in with? I had never asked them for a cent. Never once hinted at wanting a share of their wealth. Yet here I was, treated like a threat. Eleanor smiled. "You understand, don't you?" I did. I understood exactly what they thought of me. They didn't see me as a partner. They saw me as a risk to be mitigated. I should have walked away, but I loved him, or who I thought he was. So I swallowed my pride, signed the document, and let them believe they had won. They looked so satisfied that night. If I had known what was coming, I would have smiled too. The first year was fine. Not a fairy tale, but manageable. Darren was attentive, maybe even sweet at times. We hosted dinners, went on hikes, made plans. But somewhere during that second year, the shine wore off, or maybe it had never been real to begin with. Darren changed. Or more accurately, I started noticing who he really was. He stopped asking me about my day, stopped thanking me for the little things. If I cooked, he picked at the food. If I dressed up, he blinked and went back to scrolling through his phone. He wasn't cruel, just indifferent, which sometimes feels worse. He'd leave his laundry everywhere, forget appointments we made together, ignore texts. When I'd bring it up, he'd sigh and say I was making drama. Once I told him I felt invisible. He laughed and said, "You're too sensitive. You need a hobby." But what broke me was the way he started sounding like Eleanor. One morning, as I was getting dressed for a work meeting, he looked me up and down and said, "Are you really wearing that?" A week later, "You ever thought about Botox? Just as a preventative thing?" And then casually over dinner, "You should be grateful I take care of things around here." Take care of what? We both worked full-time. I paid half the bills. I handled the house maintenance while he spent most weekends golfing or hosting poker nights with people I didn't know. Except, it wasn't really our house, was it? It was always his. A gift from Eleanor and Bruce. His space, his domain. I was just the guest with the toothbrush, and they reminded me constantly. Eleanor would stop by uninvited, eye the living room, and say, I liked the furniture arrangement better before. Bruce once barked at me for moving his favorite painting from the hallway because that's not where it belongs. It was suffocating. I remember one particular night, a Monroe family gathering. A dozen relatives in suits, Eleanor floating from guest to guest like a swan. I stood by the buffet table, quiet, listening as someone asked her about our marriage. She smiled and said, "Oh, she's doing well. Darren takes such good care of her. Bless his heart." I nearly dropped my wine. I wasn't a partner in their world. I was an accessory, a placeholder in a designer life. And yet, I stayed. For the same reason people stay in houses that creak at night. I told myself it was just temporary, that love is about compromise, that maybe if I worked harder, they'd respect me. But I was wrong, because in that house, I would never be enough. I was done arguing about rugs and table placement. Done trying to explain that I wasn't a burden. Done being polite when Eleanor smirked as if I were the child she never had and never wanted. Still, I didn't leave. Not yet. Because I had no idea that life was about to throw me the one thing the Monroes never saw coming. An inheritance, a shift in the power they thought they owned. And I was about to become something far more dangerous than a disappointment. I was about to become valuable. It started with a voicemail. I was eating leftovers in the kitchen, staring at a stack of dishes I didn't have the energy to wash, when my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was clipped, formal. "Ms. Kim, this is Malcolm Green, attorney for the estate of Harold Choi. Please return my call at your earliest convenience." Harold Choi. The name barely registered. He was my godfather, technically. An old friend of my father's from their time working at the port in Tacoma. I hadn't seen him in years, not since his wife passed and he moved up to the San Juan Islands. We'd exchange cards at the holidays. That was it. Still, I called back. The call changed everything. Harold had passed away suddenly. No children, no siblings, barely any family left. But his will, it was clear he had left everything to me. Everything. His house, his gallery collection, his stocks, his cash accounts. The total value? $22 million. I didn't believe it at first. I laughed. I actually said, "Are you serious?" Malcolm, clearly used to this reaction, replied, "Yes, ma'am. It's all yours." For a while, I just sat there, stunned. The dishwasher hummed behind me. The clock ticked. The universe had just shifted and everything felt exactly the same. Then Darren walked in. He saw my face. "What happened?" I told him. He blinked. Once. Twice. Then, as if pulled by gravity, he leaned forward and whispered, "Wait, how much?" That was his first reaction. Not, "Oh my God, are you okay?" Not, "I'm so sorry about Harold." Just how much? And I knew, right then, I wasn't the only one who had changed. Because suddenly, Darren looked at me differently. He touched my face like I was fragile, kissed my forehead, told me we needed to celebrate. And from that moment on, everything shifted. Eleanor called me the next morning. "Julia, darling, can you join me for lunch?" Just the two of us. She picked a 5-star restaurant overlooking the water, the kind of place where the wine list has its own sommelier. She complimented my earrings, my career, my poise. She smiled across the table and said, "I always knew you were special." Bruce sent me an email. Subject, Monroe Aviation Expansion Plan. No greeting, just a PDF attached with a note. "Would love your thoughts. Darren started coming home earlier. He brought flowers, he cooked. Told me we should take a trip to Greece. Or maybe Iceland," he mused. "Someplace no one expects." He mentioned investing, in properties, in business. "We can grow this, Jules," he said one night. "Keep it in the family." But never once did he ask what I wanted. Because to him, my money wasn't mine. It was an upgrade to his lifestyle, a resource to be mined. And as I watched the Monroes laugh and toast and pretend they had always believed in me, I realized something chilling. I had become valuable to them, but not lovable, not respected, just useful. And that's when the first seed took root, the beginning of the end. While they clinked glasses and made plans for our future, I started quietly working on mine, the one where they would get exactly what they deserved. I started with a smile, not a forced one, a strategic one, the kind Eleanor would approve of, the kind that made people lean in, thinking they were winning. I let them all believe they had me and my inheritance, wrapped up in a neat little bow. In reality, I was already slipping away. The day after our little celebratory dinner, I called Malcolm, Harold's lawyer, and asked for referrals. Not for investment advisors like Darren wanted, but for someone who specialized in marital law and asset protection. Within a week, I had a new attorney. Within 2, I had a new bank account in my name only. Offshore, secure. Every cent of the inheritance was moved, documented, and locked. Darren had no access. No idea. While he was booking us a romantic weekend in Napa, I was sitting across from my lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Tessa, going over the prenup line by line. "You're sure this is the version you signed?" she asked, tapping the page with her pen. "Positive." Tessa smiled slowly. "Then you're going to like this." The clause was buried in legal jargon, but the meaning was clear. The prenup, so proudly crafted by Bruce and Eleanor, only protected Darren's premarital assets. It had no provisions protecting him from my future assets. And since Harold's money had come to me after the wedding, it was untouchable. To be exact, he couldn't touch a single cent. I laughed, for real this time. A deep, uncontrollable, almost wicked laugh. The very contract they used to make me feel powerless had become the weapon I would use to walk away whole. And smiling. But I wasn't done yet. I needed proof, because I knew Darren. If I walked now, he'd play the victim. Cry, beg, maybe even twist the truth and say I left him the moment money came into the picture. No, I needed something solid. So I hired a private investigator. And in the meantime, I played my part. I smiled when Eleanor linked arms with me in public. I nodded along when Bruce gave me advice on reinvesting wisely. I let Darren hold me at night and tell me how lucky we were, how destiny had handed us this moment. And I waited. It didn't take long. 2 weeks later, while Darren was in the shower, his phone buzzed. I wouldn't have checked, except the name flashing across the screen made my stomach twist. Clara. Their family's in-house legal counsel. The message read, "Can't wait to see you tonight. Last time still has me breathless." I stared at the screen. No anger. No heartbreak, just clarity. I opened the messages and scrolled. Months of texts, intimate photos, restaurant receipts, hotel bookings under aliases, Darren and Clara. Tangled in a relationship that had clearly started before my inheritance. So that was his game. He was securing his future. He didn't want a marriage, he wanted a golden parachute. He probably thought he could warm me up with attention, spend a little of my money to keep me distracted, and then walk away with some kind of payout. He had no idea what I was holding. I sent the evidence to Tessa. "This enough?" I asked. Her reply came seconds later. "More than enough. Let me draw up the papers." And just like that, the countdown began. I started disentangling my life piece by piece. My name was already off the Monroe Family Trust. I canceled joint subscriptions, quietly transferred the car title. I began searching for my own home, something better. Beachfront, private, mine. Darren kept talking about renovating the kitchen, how we needed a new entertainment wing. He even mentioned expanding the basement, maybe a wine cellar. Every plan he made was for a future I had no intention of living in. But I smiled. I made him coffee in the morning, kissed his cheek before work. Let him think I was all in. Because I wasn't just going to leave, I was going to detonate the whole illusion they had built. on their terms, in their house, with their rules. And when it fell apart, they would have no idea what hit them. It was a Thursday evening when I decided to end the game. Darren came home humming. He'd just gotten back from lunch with a potential investor, most likely code for Clara. He kissed my cheek like nothing was wrong, poured himself a scotch, and dropped onto the sofa like a king returning from war. "Babe," he said, "Dad's got this new development in Santa Barbara. Luxury condos. He wants me to invest. I told him we're in." I stood in the doorway, watching him spin his fantasies, how we'd expand the portfolio, we'd travel the world, we'd make the Monroe name untouchable. That's when I pulled out the envelope. I walked over to the coffee table, set it down in front of him, and said quietly, "Read it." He frowned. "What's this?" "Go ahead." He opened the envelope, pulled out the papers. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. His mouth twitched. "This is a joke, right?" he said, half laughing. "You're not actually—" "Julia, come on." I didn't say a word. "You do realize," he said, sitting up straighter, "that with the prenup you get nothing. Like, I don't know what lawyer sold you this fantasy." I reached behind me, pulled out my copy of the prenup, and opened it to the exact clause. The clause that said Darren had no legal claim to any assets acquired by me during the marriage. He read it, then read it again. His face drained of color like someone had flipped a switch behind his eyes. "This isn't—" He flipped through the pages, frantic. "There's gotta be a mistake. This isn't the version my parents—" "No," I cut in. "It's the exact version your parents made me sign. Remember? Over dinner?" Eleanor smiled so proudly. Silence. He looked at me. Truly looked at me, as if he'd never seen me before. "I don't believe this," he muttered. You planned this." I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out the second envelope. "I thought you might want to see these too." I tossed it onto the table. Photos spilled out. Crystal clear shots of Darren with Clara, holding hands at restaurants, kissing in lobbies, entering hotel rooms, dates, times, receipts. He stared at them, still silent. Then he sat back, as if the weight of the evidence had punched the air out of him. I leaned forward just slightly, voice calm. "My lawyer will be in touch. You're free to respond through counsel." He looked up, stunned. "You're really doing this?" I already did it. I grabbed my keys, my bag, and turned for the door. Behind me, I heard him rise like he might stop me. But he didn't speak. Couldn't. Because there was nothing left to say. This was his house, his throne, his world. And now I was walking out of it. Untouched, unclaimed, undefeated. The next morning, I heard nothing. No calls, no texts. But by the afternoon, my phone lit up. Eleanor. Of course. Not Darren, not Bruce. His mother. I let it ring. Then ring again. Third time, I picked up. "How dare you?" she hissed, no greeting. "You blindsided him." I sat on the edge of my new couch, staring at the ocean from the windows of my rented beachfront villa. "Excuse me? You're destroying him. For what? Some pathetic revenge fantasy?" I nearly laughed. "Revenge? No. I'm just letting him live with the consequences of his own choices." There was silence on the other end. Then her voice changed. Lower, sharper. The Eleanor I knew. "You'll regret this." And then she hung up. I smiled to myself. Because what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't done. Not even close. 3 days passed. Quiet. Too quiet. Then Tessa called. "They're contesting the prenup," she said, her voice almost amused. I blinked. "What?" "They filed a motion claiming the agreement was signed under unconscionable conditions and should be voided due to the sudden financial imbalance between you and Darren." I laughed. I couldn't help it. Loud and unfiltered. "They wrote the damn thing." "Exactly," Tessa said. "But now that they know Darren walks away with nothing, they're scrambling." Eleanor and Bruce Monroe were not people who accepted defeat. They were the type who built traps, layered contracts, and bullied anyone who didn't fall in line. And they weren't about to let some engineer from Tacoma outmaneuver them. But what they didn't know was that I had been expecting this. I had prepared for it. While they were busy assembling their legal team, I had quietly hired someone else, a forensic accountant named Lydia. Not just to protect my money, but to look into theirs. See, during our marriage, I noticed things. Casual mentions of offshore clients, unusually large consulting fees, a charity gala that never actually happened. Bruce was old school. He thought women didn't understand numbers. He'd talk openly in front of me like I was invisible. And I remembered everything. So when Lydia started digging, it didn't take long. False invoices, shell companies in the Caymans, income statements that didn't match tax filings. Eleanor and Bruce had been cooking their books for years. And Darren? His name was on several of those transactions because Bruce had made him an executive. A silent one, sure. But on paper? He was complicit. I didn't tell Tessa at first, not until the hearing date was confirmed. Then I handed over a folder. "What's this?" she asked, flipping through the documents. Insurance. The day of the hearing arrived. I walked into that courtroom in a tailored navy suit and flats. Calm, composed, ready. Darren was already there, flanked by 3 attorneys. Bruce and Eleanor sat behind him, stiff and stone-faced. Tessa and I took our seats. Lydia joined us minutes later, briefcase in hand. The judge entered. Formalities passed. Then Darren's lead counsel stood and launched into their argument. This prenup disproportionately favors our client's spouse, who, through an unforeseeable windfall, has created a dynamic the original agreement was not designed to address. I could see Eleanor watching me, a flicker of victory in her eyes. Then Tessa rose. "Your Honor," she said, "before we address the prenup, we have another matter that may impact the court's view on the petitioner's credibility." She gestured to Lydia. Lydia approached the bench and handed the judge a thick folder. "Enclosed," Tessa continued, "are detailed financial reports indicating ongoing tax fraud, money laundering, and intentional misrepresentation of business earnings by Bruce and Eleanor Monroe, owners of Monroe Aero Services, as well as the executive involvement of Darren Monroe." The courtroom fell still. Eleanor's face went bone white. Bruce stiffened like he'd been shot. Darren looked confused, like his brain hadn't caught up to what he was hearing. The judge flipped through the papers, then looked up, voice sharp. "Mr. and Mrs. Monroe, are you aware of the gravity of these allegations?" Eleanor opened her mouth, then closed it. Bruce didn't speak at all. Darren finally stammered, I don't manage finances. I don't even—" "Your name is listed on multiple filings." The judge interrupted. "At the very least, you signed off on them." Tessa turned to the opposing lawyers, calm as ever. "If they wish to argue that my client acted unfairly, I suggest they do so after they address these federal offenses." Silence. Real, deafening silence. Then the judge cleared his throat. "The court finds the original prenuptial agreement valid and enforceable. Ms. Kim's inheritance remains her separate property. This hearing is adjourned." I stood up. Eleanor didn't look at me. Bruce's jaw was tight enough to shatter glass. Darren sat frozen, as if hoping he might vanish if he stayed still enough. And I walked out of that courtroom with everything I came for. But I wasn't done yet, because the real consequences were just beginning. It unraveled faster than I expected. Within 48 hours of the hearing, Monroe Aero Services was hit with a federal audit. The IRS began combing through years of financials. Subpoenas were issued. Assets were frozen. And just like that, the empire Bruce and Eleanor had built on polished lies began to crack. Their clients, wealthy, high-profile, secretive, wanted nothing to do with them once the headlines started circling. Private aviation company under investigation for fraud and tax evasion. It was in every local business column within days. By the end of the week, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that their prized mansion in Capitol Hill had quietly been listed. Off-market, but desperate. Rumor was they couldn't cover payroll, not even for their personal staff. As for Darren, he tried calling. First, once, then again, then every hour, the messages started out angry. "You set me up. You ruined my life." Then came desperation. Julia, we can fix this. Just call me back. Then the final stage, pathetic. Please, just talk to me. I don't have anyone else. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about justice. It was about truth. And Darren was finally living in it, without the safety net of money, status, or power to soften the fall. I didn't celebrate, but I didn't mourn either. I heard Eleanor tried to pull strings, called in favors. But the thing about people who build their lives on image is that when the mask slips, no one sticks around to hold it for you. The company was suspended from multiple private contracts. A grand jury was convened. By the end of the month, I heard they'd officially defaulted on several loans and were being forced to sell their properties. One by one. The house I had once been told I didn't belong in? Gone. Foreclosed. The business they claimed I could never touch? Frozen under federal watch. Their reputation, the one they clung to like a crown, shattered. And me? I was already gone. I moved into my new home a week after the court ruling. A sleek, glass-walled beach house in Edmonds. Quiet, peaceful, mine. Fully paid for. No in-laws, no husband, no echo of someone else's empire. Just clean air, ocean views, and freedom. I remember sitting on the back deck one morning, sipping tea, watching the gulls sweep over the water, when I felt something strange. Stillness. Not the kind that suffocates, the kind that heals, the kind I never knew I needed. That night, I got one final message from Darren. It said only this: I made a mistake. I deleted it without reading the rest. Because some mistakes are paid in full. It had been 3 months, 3 blissfully quiet, uninterrupted, drama-free months. My life had shifted from reactive to intentional. I spent mornings walking the beach, afternoons consulting on engineering projects I actually cared about, and evenings in complete peace. Then one night, as the sky turned orange behind the waves, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something, curiosity maybe, made me answer. Julia Kim? The voice was sharp, cold, unfamiliar, but instantly recognizable. Who is this? A pause. Then, bitterly. It's Clara. I leaned back in my chair, heart rate steady. Well, there's a name I haven't heard in a while. You're a real piece of work, you know that? I didn't respond. I just waited. He's broke, she snapped, like it was my fault. He told me you were greedy, that you'd walk away and we'd start over with everything. With the house, with the company. The money. Another pause. But after your little courtroom stunt, he has nothing. My smile was quiet. I'm aware. He's living with his parents again, in a condo, a rented condo. Eleanor's been crying for weeks. Bruce might go to jail. And Darren... She stopped, voice shaking. Darren's blaming me. I tilted my head toward the phone. I'm sorry, Clara, I truly am. But if you were hoping for sympathy, you should know by now, I ran out of that a long time ago. You ruined everything. No, I said softly. He did, and you helped. There was silence on the other end, but I could almost hear the rage pulsing behind her clenched jaw. He was your husband, she hissed. You could have stopped him, I interrupted, protected him, forgiven him. I exhaled slowly. No, what I could do was protect myself, and I did. Another beat of silence. Then she hung up. No goodbye. No resolution. Just dead air. I put the phone down and stared out the window. The ocean rolled gently against the sand, the sky deepening into twilight. For the first time in years, I felt weightless. Not victorious, not smug, just free. I didn't think about Darren after that. Or Clara, or Eleanor, or Bruce. Their empire had collapsed under the weight of their own arrogance, their games, their greed. And me? I built something better, something real, something mine.